election. And a month since the start of the Occupy Wall Street protests, they have spread from Zuccotti Park in Lower Manhattan in New York to Philadelphia to Denver to Sacramento, now to London, to Warsaw, to Taipei. The fifth story on the countdown, Occupy Wall Street has become Occupy the World, with marches Saturday in more than 900 cities outside this country. And if protesters needed any more inspiration to take to the streets, these latest financial reports from Citigroup and Wells Fargo today should help. Citigroup reporting third quarter profits of $3.8 billion, up 74% from 2010. Wells Fargo, third quarter profits, $4.1 billion, up 21% from last year. And while New York Mayor Mike Bloomberg and some members of the NYPD seem eager for Occupy Wall Street to leave Zuccotti Park, a new Quinnipiac poll shows New York City voters support the protests. 67% saying they agree with the protesters' views, 23% don't. Incredibly, 87% say it's okay that Occupy Wall Street is protesting, even the ones who disagree with their points. Just 10% say otherwise. The otherwise would include the New York Police Department, which keeps stepping on the rake of public relations. What it does not hit, it arrests, with CNET reporting a new Android app that can now send a quick message to a protester's friends, family, attorney in case of arrest. It would have been useful in New York City on Saturday. 24 protesters were arrested at a sit-in at a Citibank branch in Greenwich Village, some for doing no more than closing their accounts. Followed 42 more during a major rally in Times Square. Some protesters reportedly grabbed after they tried to push police barricades aside. 3 officers briefly treated for injuries, but to U.S. Marine Sergeant Shamar Thomas, who's fought in Iraq, the violence by police against unarmed demonstrators was indefensible.
Leave these people alone. They're U.S. citizens. U.S. citizens. U.S. citizens. U.S. It does not make you want to do this to them. It doesn't. Stop hurting these people, man. Why y'all do this to our people? I've been to Iraq 14 months for my people. You come over here and you hurt them. They don't have guns. They don't have guns. They don't. Why are you hurting these people? I was in Iraq with you. So why do you allow this? Why are they walking around trying to hurt people?
Sergeant Thomas will be our guest on this program in a few moments. After the confrontation in Times Square, more demonstrators gathered at New York's Washington Square Park. 14 more arrested there when they refused to observe a 1 a.m. curfew after the NYPD asked them, nicely, to leave.
I think we treated you with respect. We want to go home. Right? We understand the cause. We understand your voice. We understand what you're saying. But all we want is to vacate the park.
Plan on getting arrested? Sit down in there. If you don't, the park is closed. Time to go.
In Washington yesterday, Princeton professor Cornel West was one of 19 arrested on the steps of the Supreme Court while the Martin Luther King Memorial was being dedicated on the Mall. Professor West and the others charged with refusing to leave the court's grounds and demonstrating with signs. To the professor, it was all in the spirit of the day.
We will not allow this day of Martin Luther King Jr.'s memorial to go without somebody going to jail. Because Martin King would be here right with us.
Prosecutors dropped the charges against all 19 today, but struggles between police and protesters continued Sunday night in Chicago, where 175 demonstrators were handcuffed after they refused to down their tents and leave the city's Grant Park. And there were more than 40 arrests in Phoenix, again for violating a park curfew. Moving around the world, in London, 5 arrests Saturday in a protest that drew at least 3,000 marchers and has now settled down into a 4th day of occupation. At least 135 people injured in Rome after anarchists in black and right-wing soccer fans rioted during an Occupy protest, causing at least €5 million in damage. And elsewhere, 2,000 marched peacefully in Warsaw, Poland. No reports of arrests. 2,000 more, including unions and indigenous groups, protested in Sydney, Australia. Hundreds more took to the streets in Tokyo, Japan. And more than 100 marched in sympathy with Occupy Wall Street in Taiwan's capital, Taipei, chanting, "We are the 99% of Taiwan." The big domestic picture of Saturday first. Josh Harkinson is a reporter with Mother Jones magazine who was at both the Times Square and the Washington Square Occupy protests, and he's with us now. Thanks for your time tonight.
Good to be here, Keith.
What did you see at Times Square? Was there provocation by the protesters at any point that you saw?
Nothing major. I mean, I think there was some pushing of barricades back and forth, but I was told, there were times when the police were actually trying to push the barricades into the protesters, and so, the protesters started chanting, you step back. in response to what the cops have been telling them. So, I didn't see anything that was terrible, but I wasn't in everywhere at once, and there were places. Yeah.
Who could be?
Yeah.
Was there some sense, though, in Times Square on a Saturday night, which was already a dangerously crowded place, just with tourists and mimes and street artists and whatever else you have, that if you have a protest and then a police department that's got an itchy, not trigger finger, I don't want to use that term, but an itchy combat finger, that there's bound to be too many people and too little space to begin with.
Yeah, I really think it was a powder keg, and I'm surprised that something worse didn't happen. I mean, I think that the way that the crowd was hemmed in by all these barricades around Times Square, they were divided into separate places. It was kind of this divide and conquer approach, but it really frustrated the crowd because A, they couldn't get anywhere, and B, they all wanted to be together, and there just wasn't enough space for that.
Did you have any sense of what the tourists who fill this place now, the way it used to be empty 30 years ago? I mean, the amount of empty space is now one person per every available one-person unit. Is there any sense of what those passers-by thought of this?
Yeah, it was really funny. It was so crowded, I had nowhere to file my dispatches, so I found a broom closet in the Bubba Gump Shrimp Company. And the guy there was really nice. He's like, oh, yeah, use my broom closet. Yeah. And so I went in there. It's just like this big. And I'm there with my laptop writing and tweeting. And, this guy was really supportive. And all these tourists were kind of fleeing into there. But once they got in there, I started asking them what they thought. And, I mean, none of them said anything negative. They're like, we're like totally with these guys.
Well, as the New York number would suggest, there's a 20-point difference between support and support of the right to protest, which is an extraordinary statistic, but it does tell you about what the mood is like here. Are you seeing a change in the protesters? What happened at Washington Square was, if you don't leave, it's time. The policemen sounded awfully reasonable in the tape that we used, and people still stayed and were deliberately arrested. Is now that becoming a tactic?
I don't know exactly what they're going to do going forward as far as arrests go. I think that's an item of debate among the people in the Occupy movement. I've been going to a lot of their meetings, and they kind of know that the more arrests there are, the more support they get. At least that's been the truth so far.
Unbelievably, it's true, yes.
But it's not fun getting arrested.
Yep.
And they, are trying to occupy Washington Square now, and that's kind of a different group of occupiers. So, there's those variables.
I'm going to go into this in depth with Tom Hayden in the next segment. But is it a fair statement to say that the leaders of this group, such as they are, amorphous and undecided as they may be about things, are beginning to come around to the idea that they want to organize at least their demands or goals for this entire movement?
I think it's a really contentious thing within the movement.
Yeah.
I mean, there is this what's called the Demands Working Group, which the New York Times wrote about today. Right. I was asking people, around Zuccotti about this, and a lot of them just didn't buy it at all. And they really want, to not have demands and instead to just kind of have a set of principles. But people have tried to come up with demands for this for, ever since it started. There have been like 2 to 3 attempts, and each time it's failed. So I think it's going to require more time, and it's just really not clear how it's going to shake out right now.
Josh Harkinson of Mother Jones, great, thanks for coming in.
My pleasure.